Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Truckers of Reddit, what's the strangest thing you've experienced while on the road? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
My dad said one time while driving at night, he was behind a motorcycle when he saw its lights suddenly disappear. He slowed down and came up the biker on the side of the road. Apparently a deer had run across and the biker hit it, causing him to crash. The biker had pretty gnarly compound fracture in his arm, but I guess the adrenaline and/or shock caused him to not feel it. Dude bummed a cig from my dad while they waited for the ambulance to show up. During my training last year, I was heading west through Ohio in the middle of some really dense fog in the middle of the night. My E-log GPS suddenly reroutes and has me go down a narrow side road. Not knowing any better, I took it. After a mile down the road, it has me to take a left. I get about a quarter mile down, and then the GPS tells me I've arrived at my destination, despite that I'm supposed to be headed to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I pulled the truck to the side to figure out what was going on, and when I noticed that the fog had suddenly opened up and I see a rundown house to the right of me, the GPS starts bugging the hell out and puts me back en route to the highway. My uncle was a truck driver in the 80s. He was around Chicago and another car had road rage because they thought he did something wrong or whatever. They were swerving at him, cutting him off, etc. He got on the CB multiple times. This is, I don't remember his handle. There's a car that's being a jackwagon, no responses. The car ended up forcing him to exit in a seedy warehouse area near Gary, Indiana. He tried the CB one more time. This is handle. I got forced off here and I think I'm going to die. He said about 4 other trucks appeared out of nowhere and started to circle the car and my uncle. The car sped off and the other trucks left, and my uncle sat there thinking, what the F was that? My stepdad was stopped at a truck stop at night. A random guy opened his passenger side door and sat in the passenger seat without saying anything. My stepdad told him to get out, and he did. He locks it now. Only a local driver, not OTR. I was delivering between 2 close towns and was passed by a really strange car one afternoon. It was a plain old station wagon with an ancient old lady driving. She was literally staring through the steering wheel as she passed. The car had gangster-style wheel rims, all chrome rim and not much tire. In the back seat was a full-sized plastic Halloween skeleton. It was sitting upright, wearing a tie and fedora, and belted in just like a person. I would really love to hear the story behind this. That makes 2 of us.
I too would like to know the story about what was going on in that station wagon, but we could probably rest assured wherever she was going, she was the life of the party.
Driving US 93 in Nevada at night, husband and I were hot shot driving in Washington to Arizona. We're native Texans, not used to the mountains, curves, or the tricks the desert night plays on your mind. So many shadows and animals that weren't sure were really there. But this is what really messed with me. Stopped at a glorified outhouse to pee. We had to use flashlights to see the toilet, which was a bucket over a hole. Came out to 2 burly men standing by the 2 outhouses. We walked back to our truck to smoke, and they just stood outside the outhouse staring at us. It's pitch black out, only a single light on the outside of the outhouse. They looked angry and hostile, and the highway is empty. We didn't see any other vehicles for a couple hours at a time. Nobody would have heard a scream. We left so quick and refused to drive past 9 p.m. ever again. My husband is the driver, but he reports that the strangest thing was when he was stranded in the middle of the road due to the lake effect snow. All vehicles were, and after like 6 hours, a lady in a car in front of him got out and pooped in the snow where everyone could see her. I was driving on I-94 near Eau Claire, Wisconsin. My cruise set at 65 miles per hour. I came upon a slow mover in the right lane, so I got in the left lane to pass. I was making my way up along his trailer. I thought I saw him throw something out his window, which isn't entirely unusual. When I reached the gap between truck and trailer, I could see his driver window. It's at this point that I think the driver is mooning me, but then a half second later, I realized the disgusting truth. The driver had his cruise set, was sitting on his windowsill with his ass hanging out the window and his feet on the seat, effectively sitting sideways, and was shitting out his window as he was driving.
So after I read the post before this, I was going to make some silly comment like, well, when you gotta go, you gotta go. And then I read this one, so I'm going to make this comment that says, when you gotta go, you gotta go. But that's wild.
I was driving up the interstate highway one night, and a pickup truck pulled up beside me. It took me a second to realize that it never actually passed me. Then I looked over, and there's a very attractive 20-something-year-old woman completely naked in the passenger seat, and she's getting fingered by the male driver. She seemed to be really enjoying it, and they had the interior light on purely so I could see. But the thing is, I'm gay, so I didn't really care. I laughed and told the other drivers I was on the phone with about it, and eventually the truck went around me and took an exit ramp after they realized I didn't seem to be all that interested. I'm from a trucking family, and this is one my stepdad told us about one night. He was down in Portland dropping a load off. It's the middle of the night, and he's waiting to find a place to bunk up. Well, as he's getting in his truck, he finds some dude just chilling in his passenger seat. Dad asked him what he was doing, and the guy said he's never been inside one before. Dad asked the guy several times to leave, and the guy just refused, and he wanted to see it up close. My dad, always the diplomat, pulled his S&W 45 out and asked if he wanted to see that up close too. The guy didn't even bother with the door and escaped through the open window. Wyoming, very rural and working in oil fields overnight. It's the only place I've experienced inky blackness. I've read it 100 times, but only see it there. As you're crawling across a rough dirt road in the middle of a huge ranch and dozens of miles away from so much as a streetlight, you don't light up the road. The darkness just barely retreats from you and hides in every crevice and rut as you approach. And animals, like hearing weird clicking noises and occasional taps directly above me on top of big silos and tanks maybe 60 feet high, get to the side and see a huge and glorious white barn owl. One time I'm pretty sure it was a hog old brown owl keeping an eye on me, but he was also very good at staying out of sight when I tried to track him down. Pretty sure he was watching me the entire time. Creeped me out a bit. And once got spooked by some cows and horses, different ranches respectively, doing the inky blackness thing. I put pressure on the brake pedal, and in my mirrors, a large bulk gets illuminated red off the left of my trailer. I rub my eyes and look around more, and there are also tiny red dots, kind of around it, and vaguely out of my windows. I turned on my spotlight and shone it around, and there was a couple of horses chilling near the road out of sight of my headlight, but reflecting the red brake lights back at me. Definitely a little spooky, but normal. Drove local delivery for a while in LA. Parked my truck in the yard of a small manufacturer, and while I was waiting on my load, someone tagged my truck, as in put a large piece of graffiti on it. One of the warehouse workers said, "Hey, someone just tagged your truck and walked around the corner." I was pissed because we were required to clean the paint anytime someone did that, so I started chasing the mother effer. Found him around the corner tagging a road sign. I was shocked because this wasn't some teenage cholo. He was a pudgy, middle-aged white guy with a beard and a button-down shirt, khakis, dad-style trainer shoes, and a JanSport backpack. I started yelling that he was gonna effing pay me or clean my truck, and he took off running. I've never seen a fat white dude run like that. I was in fighting shape at the time, and I had no chance of catching his ass, especially when he was bounding one-handed over barbed wire-topped chain-link fence. It was like I met a real-life superhero, only a shitty one that just did shit graffiti. I had to drive back to my office and clean the word Miko off the side of my truck for 2 hours. Once as a child, we stopped late at night at a rest stop because I needed to use the bathroom. That men's room was packed with a bunch of men in lots of leather and studs. I asked why all these guys were dressed so cool and similar. I asked very loudly while washing my hands, to which my dad said, "You need to wear a lot of leather when you ride a motorcycle." I, being the ever-observant kid, said, "But there's no motorcycles here." My father responded with, "Well, they must have parked them in the back," to which the whole bathroom exploded in laughter. I used to ride along with my dad 15 to 20 years ago. Riding through Gary, Indiana, I watched a prostitute get backed over at the Flying J truck stop. She was frantically running with her shoes in her hands. My dad thought I was making it up until the way back through when the CB was full of truckers paying their respects. Always wondered what the F she was running from. My uncle is a truck driver who has been running an earth-moving business since the late 60s. He was telling me recently that he was on a 50-kilometer run between two very remote towns at around 4 a.m. when a silent craft appeared and hovered above his vehicle for most of the trip, then disappeared. He's one of the toughest men I've ever met, and I could see the concern in his face when he told me that. He said his kids were just born, and he thought he may never see them again. I do not drive trucks, but I have driven cross-country more times than I can count, so I hope my comment can still find a home here. Late night drive in Virginia traveling south on 95. Jeep in the left lane pulls a left turn maneuver, drives straight up and over the median, lands it, and proceeds to continue driving northbound on the opposite side. Also, once I looked up and saw two cows in coitus just off the highway. The one was straight up vertical. My dad was a long-haul trucker in the early 80s. He did some wild shit like haul military munitions and toxic waste. Funny thing is, he was not an experienced driver when he started doing this. He had learned to drive a truck in the military and invented a resume. Good thing he was a natural. He tells a story of driving across the desert at night through tribal land. Out of nowhere, a person leaps up out of the dark and into the front of his truck. Kid was beheaded. The worst part, he says, was his friend that kept trying to put the head back on. He was there for several hours, middle of nowhere, desert road. No light, but the truck had lights. No sound, but the crying confusion of a young man and his headless friend's bloody head thumping the pavement each time the guy dropped it. My dad has been in therapy over this for years. It really messed him up. My mom, both long divorced, said he was different after that trip. I'm very confused. My dad was a trucker that went all over the country. Him and his brother used to truck together, both in different trucks, doing shady-ass shit in the early 2000s with lying about drive time, and they were driving along an interstate in the dead of night. His brother hit something and it exploded into blood, and they assumed a deer. That was until they pulled into a truck stop for the night and they found an arm hanging out of the grill. My dad said they went to the police station to hand it over, and I think they got put in jail for a day before they figured out the whole situation. Someone had committed suicide via semi along the road. It just so happened they picked my uncle's semi. I was pulling out of a lot when this clearly deranged woman ran out in front of me. I opened my door to see if she needed help. She wanted a lift. I told her I don't give hitchhikers a ride. Pointed to the lot, said I'll meet her over there and I'll call a cab for her. Woman heads towards the lot, then suddenly she's opening my passenger side door and jumping in. Again, I don't let hitchhikers ride my cab. So I'm circling the lot back to the service door to drop her inside a warm building. All the while she's yelling, I won't go back. I won't go back. I convinced her to jump out and have a cigarette with me. Meanwhile, 3 police cars swarmed the lot and arrest her. She had fled a mental health facility like 5 miles away in thin scrub paper shoes and a hoodie. I only drove real short distances, like 160 kilometers max-ish. Then I'd get to my job site and insulated place, so a bit of a mix of what I'm doing. So anyway, I'm stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic on the Lincoln Alexander Parkway in Hamilton. Windows down, summer day cause the AC doesn't work. Phone connected over aux, and decide me and the boys are gonna have a dance party in the cab, so throw on Barbie Girl by Aqua. 3 bearded, sweaty, shirtless men in a single cab truck driving our brains out. Convertible pulls up next to us, and some really good-looking women pull up. I lock eyes with one of them, stand up slightly to get my head out of the window, and just sing even louder. They're laughing uncontrollably. Really great time. Makes a good story every time I tell it in person. Not like any of those stories, but once I saw 2 birds fighting over a snake flying through the air, and wrapped around the snake was a squirrel. The birds had each ended the snake and were struggling to fly because the weight of each bird pulling the snake. The weirdest thing of all was the birds were aware of me driving through, and the truck was part of their chaotic environment because one bird tried to pull the bird directly into the line of the truck, but at the last moment swooped away to avoid being hit. Wish I could have saw more of who won the tug-of-war match. When I was a kid, I went out on the road with Dad during summer vacation. Not as creepy as most of the stories, but we once saw a trailer packed wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling with those easy light fireplace starter bricks sitting in the grass median of the highway, on fire. We saw the smoke from miles away and had to drive through it like a fog for miles as we passed it. That, and one time some racist shitheads threatened my dad because they didn't like that a Mexican man had kids with a white person. am not a trucker, but I once had a job delivering papers that started at midnight and ended at 7 a.m. Worst job I ever had. Do not recommend, by the way. There are wild animals in places you definitely would not expect. I've seen coyotes, nutria, deer, all in the middle of one of the biggest cities in America. Like, I was delivering to densely packed neighborhoods and to corporate offices and stuff. This was in the city. My gram told me that my granddad, passed before I was born, was out driving one night and saw what he swore was a bear standing on two legs right by the side of the road. It was stock still until he got closer. Then it reached out a paw bigger than any animal's and tried to grab him. She said he never went out at night again. My trainer told me about this lot lizard he picked up, and he said he sucked on her right breast for a bit, why I don't know, and when he pulled his head back, he noticed the spot where his mouth had just been was cleaner than the rest of her. In fact, that was the only clean spot on her. I was thoroughly disgusted. Amused, but disgusted.
Well, eef, ugh. Hope you rinse your mouth out.
My dad is a trucker. Told me this when he got home. Do you know the clown motel that was featured on Ghost Adventures? My dad was going through the area at night. He decided to pull off the side of the road and sleep in his truck. Now, he didn't know about the motel being haunted. He tells me he was dead asleep when he felt something rocking his truck, like someone trying to get inside. Dad said he was a bit freaked out because the rocking and scratching lasted about 10 minutes. My dad said he decided that he was just going to go ahead and move on. I asked him where he had stopped. When he told me, I told him he was just a bit away from the clown motel and that it was super haunted. My dad didn't believe me at first, but luckily I had set the DVR to record all episodes of Ghost Adventures, and luck would have it, the Clown Motel was one of those episodes. So yeah, whatever is at that hotel doesn't stay at that motel. A cattle hauler flipped over going around a turn, and their load of cows got out. Black cows walking around the interstate at 3 a.m. I stopped short of hitting one, had to drive over a few that already got hit, and were laying on their sides in the road. I can still hear their bones crunching and the mooing as they drove over them.